Welcome to another 8 Sports Extra. I'm Thad Brown along with AJ Feldman. Felt like a good time to check in with the Bills. Free agency lasted a week this year pretty much. I mean, there's still guys available and there'll still be some more moves, but pretty much the 80 to 90% majority of it is done already. So AJ, the question I wanted to ask, do we think the Bills are better now than the team they put on the field for the AFC Championship back in January?
I would say trepidatiously, yes. And
it's not a real word, by the way.
What?
It's not a real word, by the way.
Well, it is now.
Okay. I'm going to let you use it, though. I like it.
Okay. I would say my big caveat is cornerback too. I'm just assuming that they're going to put something in there, whether it's Rasul Douglas coming back, another free agent, a high draft pick. Obviously, if you were to probably put the team they can have right now on the field versus the team in the AFC Championship game, I think cornerback 2 makes a big difference, and it would tip the scales. But I just think general as a whole, the free agent moves kind of kept things on par, if not maybe some bigger upside with Joey Bosa. And just the roster as a whole, there's so many more players who could improve from last year to this year as opposed to players on the tail end of their careers getting worse. I can only think of like a small handful of guys who are maybe on the downside of their career. Defensive tackle maybe, Rasul Douglas if he comes back, maybe some more. But for the general, I think it's a rising roster. So I think just kind of that in itself would make me a little bit more confident about the team that will be on the field next year as opposed to what they did last year.
I like the point about guys going forward being players on the upswing. And the one that stood out to me when you said that is Josh Palmer versus Amari Cooper. Because I think no matter what you think of those two players, and certainly Cooper has been a much better player in his career so far, but what the Bills expected to get from Cooper and what they actually got, I think is definitely, maybe not definitely, but probably less than what you expect to get from Josh Palmer. And to go back and answer the big question for this, I think the answer for me is yes also. And even with the assumed addressing of CB2, I think if you rolled out right now with Dane Jackson at corner 2, and I know I'm higher on him than most people, but incorporated with Joey Bosa as your star edge rusher, with Josh Palmer at receiver, who I don't think is better than Amari Cooper, but the Amari Cooper the Bills got last year was almost nothing.
Yeah.
And Josh Palmer, even if he's just a guy, which I think he is, he's still a competent NFL professional, which is going to be an improvement.
Yeah, Matthew Berry, the fantasy analyst who now works at NBC Sports, he puts out a column every year about things he heard at the Combine. And one of the things he heard at the Combine that he published was, people think that Amari Cooper is done. I think it was from coming inside the Bills. It's a generic source. But the fact that nobody signed him so far in free agency, I think kind of, establishes that point that, we saw it on the field. Amari Cooper, for all of the praise that he got for, learning the playbook, for being a professional, for doing his best in a bad situation, he still didn't catch a lot of passes. So I think that was a swing and a miss on the trade market, and it kind of plays out as to what, what we've seen so far. But the strengths of this team, Josh Allen, no reason to think he's getting any worse. If anything, he holds serve or gets better. The offensive line, even more continuity, even more cohesion. Maybe only Deion Dawkins is on the tailer end of his.
He's 30 now, so
yeah.
You can make an argument there. But usually tackles, you can play deep into your 30s.
Yeah, I mean, he's not Trent Williams, but
exactly.
Certainly Trent Williams is 39, 40, whatever, playing good. And then, James Cook, probably only get better. The receivers, Khalil Shakir still on the way up. Keon Coleman, we expect a nice jump. We certainly hope for a nice jump if you're the Buffalo Bills. So I think a lot of the strengths on this team are only getting better. The safeties, more time in the system. They've got some different options. Obviously, Cole Bishop, you expect a nice little jump there. So there's a lot of reason for internal growth on the team, which is kind of what they're banking on based on these free agent moves. There's no massive swing, so they certainly think that holding serve for the most part and their young guys getting better will hopefully be enough to get them over the top.
And based on the free agent market, I think that was really their only choice. I don't think there was a free agent move out there that was going to instantly make you better. I think Joey Bosa, considering the options that were available, was probably the best swing they could have taken. I'll push back a little bit, and I still think the overall point is right. There are a lot of parts of this team that are ascending. But Josh Allen had his most turnover-free season ever. Expecting that to happen again, it certainly could. I think might be a bit of an assumption I don't want to go to. And then the offensive line, as great as they've been, at some point somebody's going to get hurt, right? I mean, they're not going to play 3 full seasons without an injury. You would think there'd be more. I mean, obviously Spencer Brown missed a game last year.
Yeah.
You would think at some point just the law of averages hits there. But yeah, I think you're right. The feeling, you want to talk about, are the Bills better? You can look at it 2 ways. Are they better for 2025? And are they better for the next 3-year window? I think the 3-year window is very much yes, based on what they've done.
Yeah, especially, the draft picks are going to come down a big part of it. Where they target in the draft, who they take, will they work out? Obviously, last year, Keon Coleman, a disappointment. Cole Bishop kind of
got hurt.
Yeah. So the rookie class didn't contribute a whole heck of a lot. If they can get, a nice jump from their rookie production that they haven't really seen in their rookie season, that's another, feather in their cap too.
The one thing I want to talk about that has bothered me the more I've thought about it is handing out contracts to Larry Ogunjobi and Michael Hoyt. And this does not even have anything to do with the drug suspension, which
is a nice little part of it.
Well, exactly. I'll make my point, and then you can just slap the drug suspension on top of that to exacerbate my point. But the Bills have depth at defensive line already. I mean, they have guys you can play. And I think more my concern is this draft is loaded at D-line. Right now, I was looking at the NFL mock draft database, which is a fun way to kind of get an idea of where players are expected to go in general. There are 25 defensive tackles and edges that are expected to go in the top 100 picks. If you wanted to go out and find depth pieces like Michael Hoyt and Larry Ogunjobi, you can throw a rock in this draft and hit 3 of them. Mm-hmm. So why the Bills spent big money on both of these guys and then continued to spend that money, even when they found out neither one would be available until Halloween, basically, that part makes me scratch my head a little bit, because you could have taken that money and addressed CB2. Asante Samuel's still sitting out there. He's going to cost you a pretty penny, but if you're not spending it on Michael Hoyt and Larry Ogunjobi, well, you got the money. And then within that point, as much as I like Michael Hoyt as a player, I don't know if I'm a fan of the Bills continuing over and over to go out and find Mr. Versatility and tell us how this guy can do so many different things.
But he can win 3 games by blocking kicks.
Well, I like that part of it the best. On defense, though, the Bills have been loaded with the guy that can do 7 things. What they have not had is the guy who's the master of 1. And that's what, when I drop back to why I think they're better, it's because they got Joey Bosa, who, he might only be on the field for 7 games. But when he's on the field, we think he can still be that elite guy. But going after 2 defensive tackles that are just depth guys, Ogunjobi, I wonder if he still has anything left. I know the scheme change is a thing. Hoyt being yet another versatility guy, it feels like you're kind of doing the same thing over and over. In one case, because you didn't have to, because of how the draft is, and the other is just, again, I want a guy who's elite, not a guy who can do 3 things okay.
Yeah, and certainly Ogunjobi, the fact that, he was the guy that they found out the suspension about the second part, and where, they had the option to back out of it. The ink, wasn't on the dotted line yet. They could have backed away. And I don't think Ogunjobi is such an important piece of their offseason plans. We're like, you know what? He's going to miss 6 games. We still got to keep him. He's so much better than everybody else. And that's kind of the story that Brandon Beane was pitching. But like you said, you're kind of hoping on him to play like he did, 3-ish years ago.
Right.
The past couple years in Steel.
When he was 27, he's now 31. Is anyone in the world the same as they were at 31 when they were 27, especially in the NFL?
Yeah, and, just the fact that they have guys at that position. I mean, would we be that surprised if Ogunjobi gave them the same production as Austin Johnson did last year? Like, they're kind of names, their bodies, they're not going to do too much. I mean, you can certainly hope that he goes back to his old form, but there's no guarantee. Like you said, he's 3 years older. And the fact that he's not going to play 6 games to start the year, he's only on a 1-year contract. So now I know the spin zone is always going to be healthier now. He's going to have fresh legs in week 7. But guess what? I think when you're working out your first 6 games, which these days, the first month or so, kind of considered preseason games. You're figuring things out. You're assessing your roster, your depth chart. Well, you're not going to be able to even do that for the first 6 games. You're not going to know what he has left in the tank until, 2 months down the line, where, you can't make any sort of moves.
And on the flip side, there's a good chance that with Ogunjobi not playing, I know they're not exactly the same position, but with him and Hoyt out, does Joey Bosa now play more snaps where you're opening the door to him getting hurt more often because you're missing those 2 players for 6 games? And I think the other thing that, let's say they were both healthy. You look at this depth chart right now, you've got Epinesa, Bosa, Rousseau, Javon Solomon at the edge. I know Solomon probably isn't necessarily a guy you'd pencil in or Sharpie into that depth chart, but you could roll with those 4. And then you've got Oliver, Daquan, Dwayne Carter, Ogunjobi at tackle, with Hoyt that can do a lot of different things. You could roll into the season with those 9 guys and be fine, maybe even better than fine. And then if you drafted a couple guys, well, now you can wheel and deal, maybe AJ Epinesa or Daquan Jones. You trade to a team that has an injury, you pick up a draft pick. It's a great way to stay ahead of the curve. Well, now you go into the draft absolutely probably having to find some depth because you're not going to have it early. But then if you spend early assets on those guys, and then these guys in Hoyt and Ogunjobi who spend money on come back, what are you doing with the roster?
Yeah.
So the spot the Bills have put themselves in by focusing so much on defensive tackle free agency, to me, I think leaves open some questioning.
Yeah, and when you spend in free agency, you have to think about what you can get at the draft. Well, where they spent their most in free agency, like you said, is probably where they could get the most in the draft. So, you're accomplishing things in free agency that you hypothetically could accomplish at the draft, and there are holes. We saw the last time the Bills tried to address a cornerback hole with a high draft
Elam.
pick.
Yeah, exactly.
You gotta wait until the 6th round to get those guys.
Right. Christian Benford has worked out okay for sure. Now, look, in the draft, the Bills will have opportunities to address corner 2 if they want to. The corner class is okay. The wide receiver class is okay if you want to get somebody there. But like I said, defensive tackle and defensive end. And the thing is, there are not Joey Bosa's in this draft. There are a ton of Daquan Jones in this draft, like solid, good starters, but not the elite guys. So the Bills did the right thing paying Joey Bosa money. Even if it doesn't work out, I don't have a problem with that move, and it makes the Bills better. And Josh Palmer, for Amari Cooper, at least the guy we got, makes the Bills better. So I think overall they're in good shape, even if you want to niggle with this one particular spot.
Yeah, and the thing we've said, they have guys, they have players, they don't have game changers. Well, the only player that they brought in who could probably be that is Joey Bosa. The draft, especially where the Bills are going to take, you're not going to count on that. So you're adding, at most, 1 game changer, we think, when that's a thing that they've been missing.
That might be enough, though. That might be enough if you just get that one guy, if he's able to play in January.
One sack fumble, and boom, you're good. And a blocked kick from Michael Hoyt.
Look, I'll tell you what, the block kick thing, we laugh about it. I mean, his contract actual is 3 for $21 million. Would you pay $7 million to take 3 points off the board from the other team? Just forget about anything else he offers you. I'm going to say, here's $7 million. You go out and block 3 extra points. It could be in the game you win by 40, but I think most teams would sign up for that.
I mean, you'd like him to do other things.
For sure. But I mean, let's just say it's just 7, and I get $3 million, or I get 3 points off the board for that $7 million. I would take that.
For every season? It's close, for sure.
All right, speaking of close, let's talk quickly here about, there are 3 rule changes, at least 3 main ones that people are talking about that were proposed at the league meetings. And these are 3 more or less generally hot button topics. We'll start with the tush push, which the Packers have proposed to outlaw. This is the one of the 3 we're going to talk about. This is the one that apparently has the least support so far. I will say I am for it. And
for what?
For banning the tush push.
Okay.
Yeah, you're right. To clarify, it's important there. The reason I'm for it has not as much to do with the goal line or the 4th and 1 version of that. But do you remember Bills Jets in Buffalo this year when there was a James Cook run where the Bills offensive line did its thing, got behind them, were shoving him 4, 5, 6 yards downfield, and Michael Clemens for the Jets decided to go airborne and just fly on top of everybody and affect the play. And look, it was a dumb play, and I don't think we should make rule changes based solely on that. But the more we allow the tush push to happen, even the 4th and the 1 yard version, I think that's going to encourage what the Bills have done, which is taking 4 yard runs and turning them into rugby scrums to move them forward, 7, 8, 9 more yards. And the more we see that, I think the more you'll see potentially other guys do dumb stuff. Look, what he did is illegal, but do we think it's impossible that some defensive back or linebacker is going to come in like a heat-seeking missile at knee level and just take out everybody's knees to try and stop the pile? I mean, you're opening the door to these things happening.
I will say, and I don't know if you mean that just the act of, tush pushing is going to cause more of these scrums, but it seems to me that the Packers' rule change would not disallow pushing down the field, like James Cook getting pushed later on.
Right, and even if you're right about that, the point I'm making is that because we're seeing more of this,
more rugby scrums.
Exactly.
More rugby scrums are going to happen in the field.
In general. Let's take them out. And look, if they want to keep, I would ban both of them. I don't like the pushing rule. It used to be you didn't, we were not able to push a running back like that. Whatever you want to ban, I'm in favor of it. And I don't hate it. Like, I won't throw my pen and get angry and break iPads like Tom Brady if they allow it to continue. But I think you are cracking open a little Pandora's box of danger by allowing this play to continue.
I would say I'm also in favor of banning it, and not for any safety reasons. This is where people push back. I just don't think it's a very exciting play.
It is not. I agree with that.
It's one thing for like Eagles fans, and Eagles say, oh, if you want to get better, get good at it. Well, even if you get better at it and stop it, it still takes place inside a telephone booth. There's no build-up to it. It either happens or it doesn't. So there's no development of the play. There's no kind of rush, excitement.
There's no play-action tush-push.
Exactly, yeah. So it's just now or never. It's more of a rugby play. So just because I don't really like watching it on TV is the reason why I'm banning for it. Is that a reason why you should take things out of the NFL rulebook? You can make that argument, but I think I would just be in favor of, you can still do a QB sneak, just don't have someone push them.
Yeah, and the NFL has changed rules for optics before. No one liked watching the Patriots hold the Colts in the AFC Championship in 2003, I think it was, over and over and over. That's where the illegal contact rule was born. So it would not be the first time the league said, you know what, that just doesn't look right, let's take it out of the game. Mm-hmm. Second one, overtime. And this one is near and dear to Bills fans' heart because in many ways, the current playoff overtime format was born of the 13 seconds game where the Chiefs won a coin toss, went straight down the field, scored a touchdown. Now in playoffs, each team gets the ball at least once. What the Eagles proposed is that we take that to the regular season. This has a lot of support already. Now look, back in the day, my solution for overtime was always take the coin toss out and just extend the game. So in other words, if it's tied, it's 1st and 10 at the 20, you run a play for 4 yards, now it's 2nd and 6. Overtime begins with 2nd and 6, first team scores. Nothing crazy, no weird rules, no back and forth, you just keep going. The current format, though, has effectively, as best as possible, rendered the coin toss irrelevant. In other words, if you win or lose, there's a good argument, the coin toss. If you win or lose the coin toss, there's a good argument for taking the ball, there's a good argument for playing on defense. I think most teams are going to play on defense, but it's close enough that I'm okay with this format.
And it's close enough that the 49ers played on offense in the Super Bowl.
Yes.
And that caused
now they got ripped for it.
But it caused days and weeks-long debate over what side you should take, and the analytics people weighed in, the football people weighed in, and there really wasn't a consensus. And other overtime rules, there really is a consensus, whether or not, in college you want to go second. Yes. In the current NFL regular season rules, you want to go first. So it's probably the most fair thing they've come up with. I'm not as strong an advocate to bring it over just because, it affects. If you go into overtime, the game is already close enough where, do we have to make it extend these forward, make the games go on even longer? I don't know how.
That is the drawback.
Yeah.
The drawback of this is that you're going to have, because part of this rule is expanding regular season overtime from 10 to 15 minutes. So the game's going to take forever. So if you're watching a 1 o'clock game and that game goes to overtime and you're going to have, for people at home don't care. Those of us here who air the games, right? If we have Bills, Dolphins at 1 and then Giants, Browns at 4:25, and that Bills game goes overtime, and that thing's rolling along until 5 o'clock, which is going to happen, those Giants and Browns fans in Rochester, New York are going to be rather upset. And this is one of the reasons why the NFL was reticent to go with these extended overtime formats.
And we saw in that Super Bowl, the Chiefs darn near brought it into double overtime just on their first drive.
Right.
So even making it 15 minutes, like what do you do when both teams
score
and then they're playing? Do we just call it a tie? Do we keep going?
That's the other part of this too. Not only will games take longer, there will probably be a few more ties. So there's good reason to be against it.
I would honestly not mind just extending the current overtime rules into 15 minutes so we get less ties. I think that's honestly my least favorite part about the current overtime rules is that we hit that 10-minute mark too many times. But I'm just in the camp of hey, we've played football for 60 minutes. at this point, we're splitting hairs on who's the better team is. So, you know what? Why don't you go out and play in defense and stop them from getting a touchdown? We got rid of the you're on defense first, the other team kicks a field goal and the game's over. That makes a lot of sense because it takes 20, 30 yards to get that. Stop them from scoring a touchdown.
Or don't whine.
Yeah.
I hear you. And that's spoken by two people who have to work games, by the way, because the last thing we want to do is a full 50-minute overtime, 3 or 4 times in a regular season. The last one I think I'll have the least debate is the Lions want to change playoff seeding from division winners get the top 4 seeds and then wild cards to seeding it by record with any tiebreaker going to a division winner. Totally for this. I thought this was an idea that would be good for a few years now. The idea of a 9 and 8 team hosting a 13 and 4 team makes no sense. I guess I want to make sure though that winning a division means something, and to me, I think this rule would still do that well enough.
Yeah, especially when you guarantee that the division winner still gets into the playoffs. I believe that's still a thing, right? We're not going to eliminate a division entirely. So I'm on board with that, especially now that we're at 17 games and who knows, maybe 18 games. The sample size is getting larger enough where the record alone should help dictate who the best teams are. If back in the day when they're playing 12 or 14 games or whatever, it made sense to, okay, let's get someone from our division like the record. But we're having teams with 5 more wins go on the road to their playoff opponent, which seems a little silly.
In other words, the 14-game season, you'd have a 10 and 4 against a 9 and 5. Who cares?
Yeah.
If the 9 and 5 hosts. Yeah, I think you're making a good point there. All right, as always, you can check out all of our 8 Sports Extra contributions at rochesterfirst.com. You click on the Sports tab, 8 Sports Extras right there. We are also on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. We'll be back through the offseason as the Bills make news or the NFL makes news, certainly for minicamp at the very least. Until then, you know what? There's a draft coming up too.
There is.
Yeah, we'll talk about that probably here before that. For AJ Feldman, I'm Thad Brown. Thanks for watching and listening.